a computer information degree, but everybody has the ability to learn a skill to make a difference in their community. So we took some of the students that some people call our castaways or our additional learning and actually provided skill-based training to them. This went so well within our welding and our plumbing programs that the governor of Arkansas came down to tour the relationship of what was going on in our city. Through that relationship, he was so impressed with the help of our local representative, Representative Murdoch. The governor and the local workforce allowed us to have a grant to where we could put 70 youth to work in local businesses within our particular area between the ages of 16 to 21. This gives these kids an opportunity, when we talked about opportunities, to earn a living, also to learn work-life experiences, but also the businesses in our area to be mentors and teach kids. One of the things that we fight in our area is the idea of the perception of workforce. This is a way that we're using a way to document this, to show that we are attacking our workforce issues and that we do have youth that are willing to go to work and are getting the skills that are needed to earn a living to support their families. So the way that you can make a difference in your community through education is a lot of different ways as mayors, by building that relationship with your local education entities, keeping the lines of communications open, and really putting the things there in place to really make a difference in their lives.
Okay. So, brothers, as our time winds down, we're going to do just some kind of like quick responses here. But let's stay on education for one quick moment. While I was at Howard University School of Law working on my law degree, I met my wife who was working on her master's in special education. And one thing I learned is that we need to be careful about those designations that we put on young people, saying that they need special education and they need to go this particular route. And a lot of times it's all about an assessment. The child may not be able to read because no one provided the child with glasses. The child may not be able to hear what's going on in the classroom because the child needs a hearing aid. So we need to do proper assessments to make sure that we're preparing our young kids. And then once you get past all those assessments, it could be something going on in the household. So how are you looking at special education just real quick, and do you think that's a concern as well?
One of the things we do, again, you said, is actually identifying what the issue is. And I grew up in a small town where we had A class and B class. And that's why you have to really, really be careful of how you label people. But one of the things that we do in Forest City is when we have our back-to-school programs, we partner with the local health institutions to really see if there are some physical abnormalities that are preventing that particular learning. And once we find out a particular issue, we know where to bring that particular help for them. If it's Kids for the Future, if it's certain different things from a dentist or different things that are needed to really remove that obstacle that might be in the way of that child receiving a quality education.
One way that we help to identify some of these constraints or barriers, so to speak, is we have one of the best hospital districts in the country with our Memorial Health System. And I partner with them annually to do child screenings, whether it's cardiovascular issues, whether it's issues to dealing with mental health, screenings in terms of eyesight, hearing, so that all of these physical or even mental challenges that may be barriers that will prevent a child from being able to meet their maximum capacity, so that they're identified early. So as a city, it's our responsibility to ensure that once we identify what some of these discrepancies may be or shortcomings may be, that we provide them to the proper resource, whether it's directly provided by the school district or health district or county administration, or perhaps even a state or federal agency or resource. So the best thing to do is kind of being that quarterback, so to speak, using my football background. So the direct resources that we may not have as a municipality, that we ensure that we are channeling them and referring them to the proper resource so that child can have the best opportunity to meet their full potential.
Whitman?
I think what I've learned is that most of the problems dealing with our children is not necessarily when school is in from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday. August through May. It's more so from 3:01 p.m. to 7:59 a.m. on the weekends in the summer when school is out and before they actually enter the school system. And so that early detection, the city of Birmingham partnering with our healthcare services, UAB Hospital, our Children's Hospital, Jefferson County Public Health Department, and having screenings where we can acknowledge that a lot of our families and their parents cannot get access to or transportation to these facilities, and that we put what I call, you've heard of Meals on Wheels. Well, we have doctors on wheels that actually come into some of these communities. They come into some of these neighborhoods, and they have these screenings similar to what they said prior to school starting, where if there's any form of detection that needs to be made, for the examples you gave of whether it's hearing, whether it's sight, whether it's a dentist or anything of that nature, mental health and all of the above, making sure our children and families get access to these doctors, these healthcare professionals that they wouldn't necessarily get access to.
Brother Scott?
I think one of the things we have to understand in this new wave of education and understanding that many of our children have food insecurity issues, many of our children have mental health issues, and most of which is because opportunities aren't available to our parents and the communities that we reside in. And so that's a greater focus where we as leaders have to impress upon our educational leaders to focus on the whole child. And as we focus on the whole child, is that we now employ restorative discipline. So we have to be slow to send our children to detention, slow to send our children to suspension, slow to send our children that's angry at a particular issue because they're hungry, or angry at a particular issue because they're experiencing domestic violence in the home. That's the reason why they're angry. That's the reason why they have an issue. And so many times we're quick to put our children in these boxes and then help them to create another life that was never intended for them in the first place. And so as we employ these different policies of restorative discipline and focus on how, at least as long as we have them in this particular point in time, because sooner or later they're going to be our responsibility. So as long as they were our responsibility within an 8 to 12 hour period of time, is how do we focus on a whole child, touching their food insecurity and moving that to security, touching mental health issues and being slow to suspension.
Okay. All right, so Brother General President Ponder and Brother General President Williams, I think we've covered education. So now I'm going to move to Brother Teemer's issue and Brother Harry Johnson's issue. It's all about the Benjamins. So let's talk about the Benjamins, and let's talk about how you circulate the dollars in your community and how the brothers and sisters in your community, they qualify, how they can get some of those government dollars and kind of help everybody's boat rise together.
Well, I think we can all learn from Brother Teemer and Brother Johnson about how to get the Benjamins, and so we need to bring them a part of our economic development team, is what they've done in their respective cities as well. But one of the things I think we have to focus on, and you're right, one of the key positions that we have as mayors, that we are the chief growth officers for our cities. It is our job, number one, to sell our city, to make certain that we are reaching out to the existing business owners and making certain that we're retaining them, helping them to grow and move from surviving to thriving in those particular issues. And then secondly, as we're recruiting those companies, to make certain that we are getting the right companies that are focused not only on our city, but focused on the whole city. Many times it's focused on a particular segment. And how do we create a growth market in the areas of tech and innovation, because it's time out for always focusing on manufacturing jobs. Yeah, it's great to have those. We need them. It's bread and butter. But we understand now moving forward that if we do not have a more tech and innovative-centric ecosystem, our cities are going to die. And so that's why we have to continue to be forward moving from that standpoint. And then we have to take advantage, too, of federal things that are coming on the horizon. I know Mayor Woodfin, I'm following his lead on a particular issue, what he's already done with his big initiative. He'll talk a little bit about that and how we're all, a team of mayors, are really focusing on how do we utilize this opportunity zone concept that's coming from the federal government, and to make certain that we don't jeopardize it with gentrification, but make certain that we uplift it with mixed income use and what I call now controlled dislocation, to create positive disruption in our communities to uplift us all.
First of all, I see Brother President has made his way to the stage.
That means time to stop him,
right? I don't even know how to unpack this topic in 60 seconds or 30 seconds, so here's what I'll say. In our communities, we got a lot of work to do to create equity. It does not exist. That's nothing new to this room. But I think in our position as mayors, when we say all politics is local, I think in our position we can be intentional about creating spaces where more equity can be shared among black businesses, among women-owned businesses, and other minority groups.
Let's give our panel a round of applause. Thank them. Give them a round of applause. Outstanding.
Brother General President, if I could just have 1 minute.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, my president. This is perhaps the most important obligation for mayors. If you are a black mayor, and if you have black businesses in your city, and if you are not working to remove barriers and to ensure that black businesses do not have a piece of the pie, you need to get up out of that seat and allow another mayor who will do that to do so. I'm the immediate past president of the National Black Caucus of Local Elected Officials. This organization is actually older than the Congressional Black Caucus. I spent my year in administration teaching cities across this country how to legally establish minority and women business-owned programs, challenging them to make the proper allocations to do disparity studies in their cities so they can understand that you are only spending maybe 1%, 2%, or 3% of your budget on black businesses, which is a travesty because we pay taxes too. So as black mayors across this country, or if you are a local elected official, understand your procurement code, challenge your councils and your commissions to ensure that you are removing these barriers so that black businesses can have a fair opportunity to do work. Because when black businesses get contracts, who are they hiring? They're hiring us in the community. When us have work, us can pay the mortgage. Us can send our children to school. Us can do a whole lot of things to build our community. So, Brother President, thank you for giving me 2 minutes.
Yes, sir, my brother. Let's give our distinguished mayors a round of applause for an outstanding job. Give them a round of applause. Give them a round of applause. Give them a round of applause. Thank you, Brother Mayors. Thank you, Brother Orange. Thank you. Thank you. As they prepare to exit the stage, we are now going to move to the second part of our discussion. And we are honored that tonight we are going to bring on now members of the Divine Nine to talk about our collective power as members of the Divine Nine. First, we'd like to invite Mr. Frater Ricky Lewis, the first Vice Grand Basilisk of Omega Psi Phi, to the podium. Please give him a round of applause as he comes forward. We now want to invite the Grand Pole Mark of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity to the podium. Give him a round of applause as he comes forward. Just go down. We would also now like to invite Tracy Atkins, the Far Western Region Director of Delta Sigma Theta, to the podium. You just move on down. We'd also now like to invite Katina Simeon, Director of the South Central Region of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, to the podium. We now would like to invite the Honorable Chris Ray, the International First Vice President of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity, to the podium. And now we would like to invite the International President, Valerie Hollingsworth Baker, the International President of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority, to the podium. And we have Miss Liberty, Rashida Liberty, the International First Grand Anti-Basilisk of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority, to the podium. Give them a round of applause as they come to the podium. We have some other elected officials who are in the audience with us also, one of whom I'd like us to acknowledge with an enthusiastic round of applause as he comes to the podium the Honorable Aaron Ford, the Attorney General for the great state of Nevada. Give him a round of applause. The Attorney General for the state of Nevada. Give him a round of applause. The Attorney General. Have a seat right there. Thank you. We are so honored to have these distinguished guests with us today. Please be seated. And now, to moderate this part of the discussion, where we as the Divine Nine will discuss the solutions, how we will use our collective power as men and women of university preparation and training, committed to public service, committed to uplift, committed to making life better through scholarship, leadership, and service. And now, to facilitate this discussion, please join me in welcoming Brother Roland Martin, the social justice commentator of America and the world. Brother Roland Martin, the social justice commentator who fears no man, who will stand when others say it's all right. My brother, you know what you do.
How y'all doing? So they said the dress code is jacket and tie. I said, I ain't wearing no damn jacket and tie. Just letting y'all know, I got to be a little different. Glad to be here, glad to see all of you. Literally just landed from Detroit for the NAACP convention, where we've been for the last 3 days. And then I hate I can't be here for the rest of the weekend because I leave tomorrow for the National Urban League convention. So we'll be there. So it's a busy week. National Bar Association is also this week. So we just call this Black Week. Can't be in all the places, but we're here. And so we want to start. So let me set the tone for this. We're going to talk about solutions. And I spoke about this 2 years ago when I gave the Brotherhood speech to Alphas, and then I spoke at the Delta Convention this year. And so to put this in context, so if you understand, so we talk about Divine Nine, we sit here and we talk about all of our membership, and we all get all excited. But the reality is, if you look at Black America, there is no other institution that has vertical and horizontal leadership like the Divine Nine. In terms of we're international, we're national, we're regional, we're state. We have grad chapters, undergrad chapters, and we have local initiatives. And I dare say we are wasting our power. We are insulated internally, but not leveraging our power externally. And I'm going to start this way, and I'm going to speak. So I want the Delta representative and Omega to speak to this. I'm also Vice President Digital for the National Association of Black Journalists. And when we called out CNN for their lack of no black producers, no black senior producers, VPs, SVPs, EVPs, and direct reports, the first fraternity that stood with us, of course, was Alpha. I hit Brother Ward on Thursday. We hit the letter on Friday. And Delta stood with us. Omega stood with us. The impact of that is when they named a black SVP, head of diversity, we said, we still not satisfied. The next week, they named a brother to be vice president on the digital side. We said, we still not satisfied. And the next week, they named another sister to be executive editor for the digitals. We said, we still not satisfied. But the point is, AT&T, who owns them now, got the message when Alphas and Deltas and Omegas and the NAACP and other groups stood with us, because when they saw that many black folks saying, we are concerned about your numbers, then they responded. Speak to, again, how we get outside of ourselves, getting so locked into our business, and how we need to be leveraging our numbers to force change externally, not just in politics, but in community as well. Go right ahead.
Good evening. I am Tracy Akins, as mentioned before. So I think one of the most important things that we have to understand is we have to use our numbers, because we are heavy in numbers. So we have to use those numbers and leverage that in our communities, because we have people that are sitting in certain positions, and those positions, we have to use them to our best advantage so that we can get outside of, as you indicated, just outside of ourselves, but because those people are working in the community every day. So we have to take our numbers and truly work in our community. That's what we said we're here to do, is to work in the community. So we have to start in that community and make our headway there so that we can get done whatever we need to do in every environment.
But Ricky, are they seeing us and our colors on a consistent basis, or are we living off of our folk who came before us?
Ricky Lewis.
I told y'all need to buckle up. So if y'all think it's going to be a little uncomfortable, if y'all want to be nice, and y'all should have invited my wife. She would have prayed with y'all. She's a minister. God gave her a wonderful spirit of comfort, but God gave me a spirit of discomfort. So I'm just letting y'all know right now, it might be a little uncomfortable in here, but y'all deal with it. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Friday Bar. Ricky Lewis, First Vice Grand Bachelors. The legacy of our organization is on the men and women who came before us, but I think they expect us to do a little better now. I just think sometimes I wonder, of all the national meetings we have and the millions of dollars we spend in these nice fancy hotels and rent-a-cars and all the food we buy and the gifts we buy, what if we just paused our national meetings for a year? We just, all the divine now, we just pause for a year, and all that money we normally would spend, let's put that somewhere, some investment, let's buy some Apple stock or something of that nature. Just think about the possibilities we could do that. I think that's what our ancestors think about, our founders who came before us, and the shows that we stand on.
But Valerie, are we too risk averse? Are we so scared of losing our 501c3 status? Are we so afraid of what others might say that prevents us from leveraging our power in terms of pushing things at school boards, in terms of pushing things to county commissioners? And again, we meet for our meetings, but do those folks see red and white, black and gold, purple and gold, blue and gold, blue and white? Do they see those colors? And then when they see us coming in, they're like, well, I don't know who these people are all dressed alike, but I might want to respond. Are we too risk averse?
No, we got to do a better job of telling America who we are collectively. We do a good job, I think, individually, but we can't do this alone. Deborah and I were in the NAACP convention a couple of days ago, and we were on a panel, and we talked about collectively spending more time together. We can't do this alone, and we've got to go at the local level, we just talked about, and spend more time saying to America that we are here. We talked about 1.5, 1.6 million. Collectively, that's a lot of folk. And collectively, we've got to organize and spend more time talking about what are we going to do with 1.5, 1.6 million folk. We've got to market that and plan.
I'll push back. I don't think we have to market that. I think we got to do some stuff that's worth marketing. So it's one thing to market something, but I think it's different when we actually have something to market. And what I mean by that is when I look at, so I'll take the state of Ohio, and if the representative from AKA can speak to this. Alicia Reese, state representative there, has been trying to get a ballot initiative to guarantee the right to vote in Ohio. She's gotten more than 100,000 signatures. They're going to need more than 300,000. Alpha Kappa Alpha is the only member of the Divine Nine who has made it their state mission to help her get those signatures. Now, y'all can clap.
But why is that?
Now, here's the deal. A few years ago, when they had the ballot initiative there, I moderated a Divine Nine panel for Congresswoman Marsha Fudge, and I asked all the presidents who were there in terms of what was happening, voter suppression there. They went back and checked, and there are 120 Divine Nine chapters in Ohio alone. Which means that if the Divine Nine said every chapter is responsible for 2,000 signatures, the Divine Nine alone can get that put on the ballot. Go ahead.
You know, I think that particularly under the leadership of the president that we have right now, Dr. Glenda Glover, we're just not scared. I think that we are, you know, we all tread lightly on our 501c7 status, but we realize that we have a president in office who is telling minority congresswomen to go back home. So we are done being silent. We're done. We want to put our names, our money, where our mission is. We mean it when we say that we're going to support our own.
And when I make the point about, and again, anyone can jump in, so we don't have to have a sprinkler head conversation. So go right ahead. So grab the mic and jump in. When I make the point about we have to have something to market, when I say we're risk averse, we can speak to issues. We just simply can't endorse candidates. And I think what has happened is we are so risk averse of, oh, what may happen to our status, without realizing, no, everybody else speaking to issues, so can we. And so what, and I'm going to go down the line, what should be that, how do you, give me an example of how your organization, it could be a chapter any part in the country, how they have used the power of that chapter or the state or the national to drive an issue, and you saw results. Anybody can go.
I want to speak to that. Specifically with Simi Gamma and the ladies of Simi Gamma, we were directly impacted by the death of Sandra Bland, or should I say homicide. With that initiative there, we brought more attention to police brutality through our organization because we had a direct impact from a Divine Nine sister who was hurt while in custody. Through the partnership with Noble, through partnerships that have expanded beyond our organization to all the Greeks, we have been able to teach and educate our community on how to engage with the police, how to bring attention to when we're constantly getting hurt while confronted by the police. I believe this is one of the bigger issues for us where we said we have to rally and do something. There's still more work to be done in this space, so I know you're about to counter. But we have opened the door for the conversation through the unfortunate situation with Sandra Bland.
But we would also talk about that, though, what also happened when you had Black Lives Matter, you literally had some Divine Nine organizations who told their members don't wear their letters to protest. And Brother Tillman, when he was general president, he and I talked, and literally when that went out, that night he sent a statement out. He said, no, to all members of Alpha, wear your letters to a Black Lives Matter protest. But that's what I mean why some of us are so risk averse. There were folks who were literally saying, well, no, I don't know where we need to go. And again, I'm talking about how we use our power. When you get that 14-year-old black girl who had her face mashed down by the cop in Texas, in McKinney, I called out the National Organization for Women, but I also said to black sororities, y'all need to be speaking up for that sister too. Because she might have a member, and if she don't have somebody in her family who's a member, we still should be speaking up for sisters like that. The sister who's in South Carolina who got snatched out of the desk by the cop as well. What I'm saying is, and it don't take a week to release a statement. We got to be in the moment in the first 24, 48 hours using our leverage. And don't think for a second I'm just talking about Divine Nine, because I'm also in the Boule, and trust me, they also know I've challenged the Boule the same thing, saying we got to be more than social parties and getting together, because there's no sense in having power that's unused. So you mentioned Sandra Bland. Who else? Give me an example of how the organization has used their power to drive an issue.
This past election cycle in Phi Beta Sigma, I just recently got elected as the first vice president, but was recently serving as a social action director. One of the things that I was most proud of our brothers during this past election cycle, during the midterms, was the level of engagement of chapters that we had around the country. One of the things that I shared with them was that registering people to vote was not enough, right? Registering folks to vote is not enough. You have to educate your voters on the challenges and what's going on in their communities.
Connect the dots.
You got to connect the dots. But once you educate them, then you have to take them to the polls. See, there's a three-part series to this, and so a lot of our organizations were satisfied with just registering folks to vote. But what I was excited about was the town halls that we had, the candidate forums that we had, educating the community on the ballot initiatives that were taking place across the country.
Now, how did that happen? Was that the directive sent from top down?
Absolutely.
Said this is what we're doing?
Absolutely. What as the National Social Action Director, I shared with our chapters is that we have to look further and go deeper than just feeling that we were satisfied with meeting the quota of registering people to vote.
So you registered folks to vote, had town halls, and how did you get them to the polls?
We had chapters that we had 1-800 numbers. Call a Sigma, take you to the polls. We had brothers that rented vans. We had folks that rented cars and were in their communities, and it was literally busing and taking folks to the polls, not only just on election day, but actually from early voting. They had from early voting all the way to election day. And so that's the way that that's what we did. And as we talk about as our organizations and leveraging, we have to make sure we have to go deeper. We have to go deeper than just registering folks to vote, educating them, and then getting them to the polls. And then after you get them to the polls, then you follow up afterwards, after the election cycle. What went wrong? Did we get the results that we wanted? And keep on drilling down.
Before the next comment, again, I need to put it in perspective, our hierarchy. Unlike any other institution, when our international leadership presses a button, the directive goes to everybody. You take AME, you take other hierarchies, folks have options whether to follow it. And that's what I'm saying, how we can use our power differently. Go right ahead. And then I'll go here.
Thank you. I would say that we are doing the same thing for Theta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. But one thing I would have to also say is that even with education and educating in our communities, we need to be able to go inside and educate ourselves. And that's what we have been trying to do with our Get Engaged programs, because that helps to get the mindset changed of our organization.
You said a Get Engaged program. What is that?
Well, Get Engaged meaning when we're doing things in social action, we have a step meaning, okay, when you say we need to respond to an issue. And of course, we're going to respond to it, but just responding to it and saying, this is our stance. What are we going to do about it? So the Get Engaged piece that came out several years ago is when we mobilize our organization, our members, to really go out into the communities and to be engaged and to try to talk to our members in the community, try to get them to understand what is going on and how we can help them and how we can bring about change in their lives and how they're thinking about certain things so that they could be more aware.
Okay, so hold up, let's break it. So this Get Engaged program, how often do you meet? Where is it? How many cities? How many chapters?
We have Get Engaged throughout all of the cities in the U.S., and we're trying to...
Is it only for members or open to general public?
No, well, the members are involved, but we send it out into the public. So we have our seminars, we have our webinars, but we actually go into the actual communities where we live.
Got it.
And we try to really have one-on-one sessions per se. And we go through our neighborhoods. We actually walk the neighborhoods. We ring the doorbells. We talk to our neighbors. We want to see what is going on and how we as an organization in their areas can help and what we can do to start the grassroots movement.
Aaron.
Thank you. Roland, good to see you. You tricked me. By the way, he and I went to Texas A&M together, y'all. We go back a couple years. I texted him before I came downstairs and said, you going to be at the convention? You going to be at the party? He just said, yeah. Didn't tell me you going to be moderating my panel, man.
First of all, you're a Kappa. This ain't your panel.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Let's just go ahead and be clear.
Well,
let's just be clear.
Watch this answer, and we'll see whose panel it really is.
I mean, you might be the Attorney General, but you still a Kappa.
and I am still pretty, too. Since you asking, I mean, come on now.
I'm glad you affirm yourself.
Anyway. So I'm going to try to walk a line with this response, Roland, because I don't purport to speak on behalf of my fraternity. My grandpa Mark is down there, and he can do that. But here's what I can tell you, and I want to take the opposite approach than what the gentleman said here a second ago about the top-down approach and the questions you've been talking about. I can tell you from personal experience, and before I talk about my personal experience, I need to acknowledge a few of the other elected officials here. I know I see Councilman Cedric Creer, your fraternity brother here from Las Vegas, and I see my former colleagues, Dina Neal, Assemblywoman, here as well. I want to acknowledge them. Let's give them a hand. I don't know if I'm missing any others, but here's what I can tell you. During this last campaign cycle, I was the Senate Majority Leader, and I was running for Attorney General. And what I did observe from every chapter that's represented in here, every fraternity that's represented in here, I spoke to. And not only did I speak to them, they spoke to me. They had me at their meetings. They didn't just seek to educate me, they sought to be educated. They sought to ask questions about what the Office of Attorney General did. They sought to see what they can do to help spread the word about what the Office of Attorney General did. I saw them in the communities. I saw them at the polls. I saw them pre-polling. I saw them at their candidate forums. I saw every fraternity and sorority that's represented in here at the local level doing work. And that's an important acknowledgement that needs to be made, because oftentimes, as you've indicated, go ahead, that's worth a clap. It really is. But because oftentimes what's overlooked is the actual work that is done. A lot of people complain about what you're not doing, as if to say that what you suggest they do is the only way that you can serve. There are many ways that you can serve, and what I saw happening at the local level here were people chiming in, fighting on issues, talking about issues, getting educated on issues. You're right, not necessarily endorsing candidates, because that's not what they can do. But what they can do, and what they have been doing, at least locally, as I observed it, is ensuring that our communities are engaged, that they are informed, that they are able to meet the candidates, and that they assist the candidates who support the policies and the practices that are important to them.
Tommy? I said I need an example. Come on, Kappa.
I can handle it now. Let me just say this. I want to go back to the NAACP as well. The other day when we were there, we saw a lot of people who were getting up in age, but they came for the struggle and the fight. And one of the things that dawned on Deborah and I, the question is, who's going to take their place in this struggle? We make a lot of men and women in our organizations, and they are not engaged in this fight like those folk that came to the NAACP. And they don't have that same kind of commitment, and we've got to do something about that to help them. Now, we have, all of us signed the MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding with the NAACP. From an infrastructure standpoint, they have the most successful voter registration, voter education, get out the vote programs that we know of. Urban League has them as well. But as we get ready, we need to do a better job of helping in our communities as we get ready for the election and the census and all those other kinds of programs. We are engaged with them. We can't do this alone with our organization as with the numbers we have. So we have got to do a better job with that. As Aaron said, we went to Aaron, but we've got to do a better job at the local level and assist the NAACP as they transition and as they look to new leadership. When I took over as Kappa at Grand Polmar, I went to the Brotherhood and I said, I want every new member, alumni and undergraduate, to be a member of the NAACP. You got to have a Kappa card and an NAACP card. And they bought off into that. We delivered 5,059 new members to the NAACP since I took over as a Kappa. That also translated into dollars for them. And so we can do those. And when they do demonstrate in their direct action, I authorize the wearing of their paraphernalia. After all, that's why they go out there, to show who they are. And so there are policies that we all have on when you wear paraphernalia, and they've got to get permission. But we need to allow our young people to support them when they do direct action, because they have an infrastructure when they do protests and demonstrations, because I go out there with them when they have their protests and demonstrations in these seasons and these times that we have. So I'm saying that we need to do a better job collectively.
Okay, hold on. What does a better job mean? So I don't, again, what does that mean? What does that look like?
That means when they go, we need to go with them.
Right, but here's why I'm pushing back for anybody. How is, within your infrastructure, how are you creating the mechanism that trains them, that organizes them, that mobilizes them, and then send them out?
So,
and what does that look like?
So we have training sessions with them now, for example, in preparation for election time. We have webinars, we have training sessions, we have social action chairs.
Okay, now when you say election time, national elections, or are we talking about county, state, governors, city council? Because the whole point of this is us not just focus on a midterm or presidential election, but impact the local races as well. And again, what does that look like, training? How long is it? Is it open to the public? Is it just members?
Right now, our social action chairman do midterm and the national election.
And that's what has to change. Because the reality is The polling data shows nearly 60% of the people say they're more impacted by what happens locally than what happens nationally. The reason we have voter suppression right now in the country is because in 2010, black folks voted in 2008 for Obama. Folks did not vote in 2010, and 16 state legislatures flipped all across the country, putting Republicans in control of 31 of them, and that's when voter suppression bills all came down in those particular states. That's where Stand Your Ground came down. And so part of this, and the reality is we talk about criminal justice reform, mass incarceration. If we ain't voting for the district attorney, that's the person that has the most impact on mass incarceration. And so what we have to do is take our voter initiatives, and they can't be every 2-year initiatives. They have to be everyday initiatives, because there are city council, county government, state elections, water board, you name it. And the reality is, anybody who knows with school boards, you could literally take over an entire school board with 10,000 votes.
Right. But that
So
doesn't
if
mean
we actually just mobilize ourselves, we could literally take over an entire school board, which means we now control the bond program, we now control who gets hired, and we control the policies. And so that's what I mean by trying to pushing us to go beyond and say, no, take this thing beyond the national election. You wanted to respond. I saw you grab the microphone. You want to say something. Go ahead, Sigma.
Just a few things. So I think one of the things that we all have to recognize is, we're making new members all the time. And you're bringing in a generation of folks who don't know about engagement. And so to your point, engagement for the Divine Nine has to be every semester. It has to be continuous. And now, one of the things that we're doing in Sigma is, now, as Social Action Director, I will honestly say we were about it in our organization. We developed a guide for our chapters that they can go to from top to bottom as it relates to how to put on a voter registration event, how to put on an event in your chapter. Because why? Because you don't have all sharp men that join your organizations initially. And so you have some individuals that are coming from different backgrounds. And so we have to do a better job of providing tools for our chapters as it relates to what they're going to need. And I will tell you this, and I always say this to all my chapters: you wear your letters. You let them know that we were here. As long as you don't bring reproach upon the name of Sigma, and that should be for all of our organizations, because they need to see that we are in the fight, that we are there. John Lewis, we love him, right? But there is another generation of John Lewises that are coming, and they need to get ready. And so we have a responsibility in all our organizations to continue to train the next generation. We make new members all the time. We need to engage new members all the time. We need to train them all the time. We need to stay in the fight all the time. We need to deal with the issues all the time. We have got to be at it all the time.
So we talk about how do we organize and mobilize. I know there's Delta Days on Capitol Hill. I was spoken there. I know the Alphas had the event this year. Who else has a day or a series of days where they drive their membership to Capitol Hill to interact with all members of Congress? Raise your hand. All right. So let's see. Kappas do. Keep your hand up. I mean, Kappas do, Deltas do, AKs, Sigmas, Zeta Phi Beta, of course, and the Alphas. Now, who has the same thing on the state level? Now, all states, or do all states do it? Go ahead.
So go ahead. No, you
all states have Day at the Capitals. Every single state is represented in every single region. And so that comes from the top down. So every single state in the United States is represented with AK Days at the Capitol.
And they show up. I'm here to tell you. I was a former Senate Majority Leader.
We do.
Right.
Assemblywoman Neal was there. They show up. They participate. This is what we do locally.
And that's and the reason I'm asking that, because again, the whole point of this is solutions. Because look, I'm not interested. Look, I didn't come here to say let's have a nice little conversation amongst ourselves and then we go into the Gerald Albright concert. No, you have to leave here with something to say, if we're not doing that, let's take that thing back home and then do it back home. You want to jump in? Go ahead.
But okay, you're going to go. No. We take it a step further. We have this thing called Sigma Week on the Hill, and what our leadership has done is that we recognize the importance of investing in the next generation. So what we do is we identify 2 collegiates from each of our regions. We have 7 regions, 14 young men that we bring in, all expense paid, for the week. And what we do is that we train and invest in them what advocacy looks like. Not only do we take them to the Hill, not only do we bring policymakers in with them to show them, as we talk about college affordability this year, what's their issues, but what we've done now is we've begun a pipeline of young men who are being trained. And then we end the week with Sigma Day on the Hill, where we have all of our alumni brothers who come in. But for the week, it's about that next generation. And so we've now done it 3 years in a row. We've now created over 30 young men who are in this pipeline, some of them who have now run for national positions and regional positions in the organizations, beginning this pipeline of advocacy, because that's what we're missing. It's not just about leading. We need more advocates, another pipeline of advocates. That's one of the things we've done differently.
Roland, if I could add to this, one of the things that we do, so our connection, our social action committees, every single chapter in the sorority is required to have a connections chairman. I think one of the things that we realize is that it is a problem. Engagement is an issue. And so what we've started to do from the top down is hold them accountable. So those connection chairmen are required to submit reports nationally every single year to detail what they're doing in their chapters every single year. And so we try to hold them accountable. We try to make sure that it's not just an every 2-year thing. We want to give you strategies for making sure that you're promoting civic engagement throughout the year.
When we talk about infrastructure, I spoke at the Alpha's Tampa grad chapter. They had a mentoring program. And literally during the middle of my speech, I said, y'all, be perfectly honest, I'm about tired of these mentoring programs. Folks were like, what the hell is wrong? The point of the gala is for the mentoring program. And I said, here's why. I said, because how many people are actually in the program? And so I began to walk them through. I look at the discussion early to deal with education. And I said, imagine if in the next 5 years, we created 50 Alpha Academy charter schools across the country. Then imagine if each Divine Nine member did that. That means that if you took an average school of 500 students, that means we will be in control of 225,000 students for 9 months or the whole year. And again, I think a lot of us, we realize that we are members of large organizations, but I really don't think we fully understand how large we are. Second, unlike all other black organizations, we're self-funded. Our conventions aren't predicated on corporate sponsorships. And so again, it's how we also use our resources. And so if you could push your organization, give me one idea, each person, I'm gonna go down the line here. As one thing that you would love to see using your organization's infrastructure that's big, what is it? I want you to go big.
I'm gonna start on that. Well, you go,
who wants to go first?
Well, one of the things I share with our brothers, last week we were in Nevada, and one of the things that I shared with them is the future of Sigma. And what I expect from them is that we need to create our own ecosystem.
Okay.
Our own ecosystem. And what does that look like? And I just started from the end and started bringing it to the end. So I'm just going to do the end as an example. If we're not taking care of our senior Sigmas, if we don't have our own assisted living facilities by the year 2030, 2040, we have failed. We should be having our own Sigma Wellness Initiative. We should have our own Sigma assisted living facilities where we have the nurses are Sigmas, that the administrators are Sigmas, that we're taking care of our own brothers in the last years of their life. And now, and we can take it all the way back to the beginning. So I love you when you talked about the school piece. But one of the things that I hope that we're going to turn towards the end is that we're going to have these Sigma assisted living facilities all over the country taking care of our brothers in their last days. And that's us controlling that.
All right. Somebody else. I need your big idea.
I would say, since we are always meeting every year, we're meeting someplace. If we're going big, we need to all get together and purchase some property that has a building on it that we can all meet at. And therefore, we're not taking our dollars and giving it to the Marriott. We're not giving it to the Hilton. We're not giving it to the Sheraton. But we're keeping it with us So that's, if we're going big, I say that's how we start to go big.
I would say just from a financial equity positioning, we know that in order to have wealth and to build that generational wealth, real estate is number one. If you don't have a real estate infrastructure, you're failing financially. If you also do not have an investment strategy, you're failing. And I'm coming more from a financial standpoint because that's what I do in my professional career. But I know that we're 46% more impoverished if we do not own our own. And so with that, I would say collectively, I know all of us are speaking to our own individual organizations, but we're not going back to the original question as to how do we build that infrastructure together. And my sister here hit right on it when she mentioned the real estate piece, but I think there's also an investment infrastructure that needs to happen where we tear down our walls of our colors, but get more focused on the mission of our people and look at how we can collectively own real estate and collectively invest in our infrastructure.
All right, batter up.
Yeah, she said what I would say, which is if I'm thinking big, I'm thinking more collaboration. I talk about that all the time, less individual goals and all of the Divine Nine coming together more. And I'm talking about locally, regionally, to push our platforms out to the broader community. I think if I'm thinking big, I'm thinking about collaboration.
As this sister said earlier about the investments as well as I started this conversation that way. Let's pause these national meetings, take all this money we spend, buy some property, get some investments, like I said earlier, and we can do anything we want to do. We invest in property and equities and get a return on our investment if we pause some of these national meetings that we do.
Next.
I would also like to see that, but I like to focus on education. What you said earlier was when I became the president, that was one big thing about creating charter schools across the U.S. I think we started working on that. We're looking into that so that we can get our bases together, but that is like one of our goals. And our second goal is that we also want to have some training in a classroom type setting for our members and others who are looking into going into politics. Needed to let them know that there need to be more of us out there so that we can challenge and push the needle where it's supposed to go, because that's what really happens. We have a lot of other people talking for us, but we need a lot more of us that we can go out there and know what we need and what we can help, and we can help them to do that. And I think that with having a collective session with all of us thinking about that, it would be so important, because together we are so much stronger than we are when we're separated. And I think we have to really focus on that and put it back on us to know that let us talk about that. Let us focus on one thing that we can all do and get involved with and make our voices heard for the next generations, because that's so important, especially with education. I'd just like to say that for that piece of education, for Zeta Phi Beta sorority, I have promised that for as long as I am the president and moving forward, because I want our session to vote on this, but we plan on at least giving a $100,000 scholarship to a deserving student each year, so that will help the focus of that. They will not have to be challenged and think about the funds that they would need to go to college. And this will help, and we can build on that. And the more of us that do that together, look how much that would help more children, because we give a lot of money, but when you get sizable amounts of money to help one student and just pick 5 students and you give them $100,000 each to go to college, that's something. That's something big that helps the children, and that's what's really important.
Go ahead.
So we all are membership-driven organizations, and I think that we really need a think tank collectively to come together. I would suggest that we're probably about a year, maybe a year and a half away from not being able to bring members into our organizations through our intake processes. And I think we need to collectively come together and bring some of our brilliant minds together to figure out what we're doing and look at our intake processes. because if we don't, I think we're going to perish as fools, because there are things happening out there that's going to hurt us, whether it's on the alumni level or the undergraduate level. And I think that there perhaps is a formula on how to do that, but we need to sit down and talk, because perhaps if you're doing something that's working, we need to come together and figure out what that is, because I just don't think it's working. And you don't need a rocket scientist to see that. But I think we need to come together, close the door, and figure out what we need to do to try to fix it, because university presidents are telling us that we love you, but we're just not going to allow you to continue to do the things that you're doing on our campus, our jobs and our universities and our colleges and our students. We're just not going to allow this to continue this way. So I think we need to come together and figure out where we're going.
Thank you. So, Roland, I'm a politician, and I won't purport to speak on behalf of my organization or any other organization here, but if I had a dream for all of these organizations that are represented here, it would be that we focus on the individual. As a politician, to be sure, if labor unions come talk to me or they raise their voice, then they get my attention. If the chamber comes talk to me, absolutely, as an affiliation, it gets my attention. But I'm going to repeat something that one of the mayors up here said a minute ago. When you call me, and when you call me, and then you call me, and then we ended up getting 15, 50, 500 calls from individuals, then we really stand up and listen. The two people who I just mentioned to you a second ago, Dina Neal and Cedric Creer, when people call us and they're letting us know that there are issues that are going on, we don't want you silent on them. We want you to focus on these. We want you to handle the issues, then that's important. And I think that one of the things that all organizations can do is to empower the individual, to empower the individual member, even if we can't, for example, as Kappa Alpha Psi, endorse Fred Jackson for city council. Each individual member can ensure that Fred Jackson, the city